Great. Great. Okay, so today's webinar is on co-working entrepreneurial education with other areas. Today we're going to particularly look at developing the entrepreneurial citizen. So co-working entrepreneurial skills and mindset work into education related to democratic culture, citizenship, social innovation. And this is what we'll be exploring through two speakers. We have Pascale Mompoint Gaillard of LearnToChange.eu, who is with us from Strasbourg, and she's one of the co-authors of the Council of Europe Competence Framework on Democratic Culture. And so she'll be sharing her work related to developing that, but also then implementing that and highlighting the links with entrepreneurial skills. And also then we have Irene Kalemaki from Nemesis project, which is a Horizon 2020 project working on co-creation methodologies supporting young social innovators. Really interesting project with, supported by European Union funding. And so I'm very excited to hear from both of these speakers. There's a few things I'd like to flag up before, of course. Now, this webinar is part of a series being run by the School Education Gateway, an initiative of the European Commission, DG Education and Culture, and is facilitated by European Schoolnet. It's part of an online space. So there is a collaborative space for entrepreneurship education, which we invite you to join. The links will be up at the end of the webinar. And we invite you to join that to receive updates on different webinars we're doing, but also to explore the resources that we have available there and links that might be of interest to you. The webinar today will be recorded. So anything that you put, anything that we show will be within that recording, and obviously the chat will be part of that recording too. So we very much ask you to interact with us. If you've got any questions during the webinar, please put them into the chat space, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And I can see a lot of people already typing in there as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the webinar. We will have two presentations from the people I've mentioned. Each will be followed by a question and answer. And we will then ask a couple of questions at the end as well. But first of all, my name, Irene McCallum. I work for Bantony Education, a non-profit in Brussels, working obviously with School Education Gateway to facilitate this work. And I'm curious to see, out of the people that we've got, in the webinar, are you already aware of some of the work or involved in some of the work that we are doing? So you can see here on the screen, we've just put in a quick poll. Are you aware of the Council of Europe Competences for Democratic Culture already? We've got one answer. 2, yes, people are already using it. Not yet. Quite a few people there. I started working with this when I met Pascale during some work that we did together in the Ukraine with the European Training Foundation and the Ukrainian government, who are co-working entrepreneurial skills through Entrecomp, the European Competence Framework for Entrepreneurship Education, and this Council of Europe Competence for Democratic Culture. And I was so excited by the work they were doing there that this really has inspired this presentation today. And I hope to do a future webinar really profiling the developments that are going to take place in the Ukraine and perhaps other countries that are looking to co-work these competences at national level. So lots of answers coming in, and not surprisingly, not so many people aware of this competence framework. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your answers. You should be able to see them there now. But we have a couple of people already using it. Okay, great. Now I'd like to just go on to the next question now, which is just let's just see, how are you already involved in the themes that we're addressing today, or are some of these perhaps new for your work? So are you already involved in either education for democratic citizenship, democratic culture, entrepreneurial mindset skills development, social innovation, which is really the focus of the Nemesis project we'll hear about, or perhaps all of the above? So please let us know your answers. Lots of answers coming in. Great. We've got lots of participants today, so I'm really pleased to see such interest in this topic, because I think it's so important. Having worked as a youth worker back a few years ago now, I remember seeing the importance of these skills we talk about. I link back to the EntreComp framework, the Entrepreneurship Competence Framework that the European Commission has developed, which looks at this kind of ideas and opportunities, resources into action, the curiosity, creativity, vision, moving into mobilizing your own understanding of what your capacity is, and then others as well, bringing them on board and putting those ideas into action. That really is, that's a skill set, a mindset that is possible to develop with an education, within formal and non-formal, and also is so important for the life we live in today. You don't know what your job's going to be in 10 years. I don't know what my job's going to be in 10 years, let alone young people coming out of education. And also the society we live in. We need different skills to navigate our way through that, to contribute as well as achieve our potential. Okay, brilliant. We've got lots of people working on entrepreneurial mindset skills, some on democratic citizenship, 2, and then social innovation, we've got 5 people, and all of the above, 9. I'd love to know who you are. That would be very interesting to hear about some of the work that you're doing. If you're perhaps if you're combining those skills into different activities, actions, or initiatives that you're taking forward. So please let us know. Okay, well, without further ado, I'd like to continue on to our first speaker, and very much welcome Pascale Mompoint Gaillard, who's in Strasbourg, talking to us from there. We'll bring her in. Her presentation will be just starting now. And she's coming online.
Yes,
so,
I hope
hi,
you
Pascale,
can.
we hear you?
I hear you very well. Does the sound okay?
Fantastic.
Yes.
Great. And if I can ask you to turn on your webcam.
Here I am. Hello, everyone.
You too.
Thank you, Ellen, for this nice introduction. Can you see my...
If you just click...
Aha. Like
if
this?
you click on the share your webcam. Perfect. That's great. That is brilliant. Good. Great. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And just very excited and interested to hear more about your work in this area. Thank you very much. I'll leave the floor with you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. And hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm going to do this presentation to talk to you a bit about the European framework, reference framework for competencies for democracy, and linking it, as Ellen said, to entrepreneurial learning. I just check, how do I navigate this? Yes. So Ellen told you that I am from an association, LearnToChange. We are a group of educators, academics, teachers, school heads, and also people involved in journalism around issues of democracy, who are interested in changing the way we learn. And so we're very interested in seeing the education systems that we have also evolving and taking more into account the role of democracy, human rights, and making sure that the vision of society we have corresponds to the vision of education. So that we have a more just and inclusive and thriving society. The aim of my presentation today will be, first of all, to talk about citizenship competencies, and then linking them with EntreComp. So the two models that we have here can be co-worked, and we're going to start thinking about that. And also some thoughts on pedagogy and assessment, moving on more to how do we do it. So what is it? How is it linked? And then how do we do it? This is a bit how the presentation is constructed. So here I'm showing you the reference framework of competencies for a democratic culture that was developed by the Council of Europe. It was a work done over 4.5 years, so very intensive, involving 12 different experts from different countries. So some very intensive work here done. And the RFCDC model sets out the values, attitudes, skills, and knowledge and critical understanding, which an individual needs in order to be an active participant in a democratic culture. society, or group. I'm going to give you a short overview, very short, of what is inside because you can access it online, especially if you go, where I found it the most available is on the European Vergeland Center website, and you can download it there. But what you're going to see there in this framework is 3 volumes. So the first volume is going to give you the model itself, the concept and the principles behind the model, and also all the definitions that you need to understand what is meant by a democratic culture and even what is meant about competencies for democratic culture. You will find in volume 2 the descriptors, the main descriptors, which are 135, and a full list, including the main, with more descriptors, which will bring the total descriptor number to 447. So anyone can use the whole list or only part of the list, only the key descriptors, or make also the list that makes sense with the context that you're working in. And the volume 3 is very important because it gives very good directives or guidelines, I would say, on how these the model can be adapted or used in terms of curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, teacher education. So these 3 models really give you the whole spectrum of what you need to know to be able to use these competencies. And I'm showing them to you right now. So you see that this framework shows you 20 democratic citizenship competencies that you have right here in front of you. They are grouped into what we call a butterfly. And you will see that you have the values, the attitudes, the skills, and the knowledge, critical understanding that are needed for someone to become an active citizen. And this will guide how also educators can help young people or any learner develop these competencies. It's interesting to see, I would like to place this into a wider context. So we're presenting here the RFCDC. We'll be also talking about Entrecomp, and we don't know now that the OECD has developed a new competence framework also, which is the Global Citizenship. I didn't write the full name of it. Global Competence Framework. And this one has similarities on both sides. So I found it interesting to talk about it here because of this linking between intercultural competencies, the labor market, the digital citizenship, and the sustainable development goals. We're here exactly in this idea of linking. And the other reason I wanted to show this is that we are really talking about things that are high on the policy agenda right now. If it's in PISA, it will be on your desk, not very far from here if you're in education in Europe, for sure. So I would also like to, right now at the beginning, look at the Entrecomp flower. So we're in all these shapes also, the wheel, the butterfly, the flower. So there's a kind of common way of envisioning this work. And Entrecomp talks about creativity, innovation, capacity to involve others, etc., and refers to values, that it's the value for others. It's the value that can be created in different contexts. So we'll be talking more about that because that's an interesting concept. So what do we mean by a culture of democracy? You see here the different components that I've put together. This is a definition. It is not the definition. It's the one that is used and that I use in this presentation, and that is very close to what is used in the RFCDC, maybe simplified. So first of all, it's voice and decision making, which is part of the participation aspect. The human rights aspect is about the equality of rights for each and every individual. Inclusion, yes, meaning also equity in order to balance any discrimination effects that any society carries within. Cooperation, meaning doing together, learning how to do together. Tolerance and acceptance being part of diversity, and communication, awareness of self and the other in order to communicate respectfully and efficaciously. We're talking about education, so every time I try to do anything or reflect on anything with education, first keep in mind what the purpose is, because it's this image of the purpose of education that you have that is going to actually really orient whatever you're doing as a practitioner, as a policymaker, as a school head, etc. So this is extremely important. For the Council of Europe, I really like this way that they've defined the four components of the purpose of education. Two of them are what you usually see done, and this is preparation for the labor market and the development of a broad knowledge base. Now, what you see less in schools is the preparation for life as active citizens and the personal development aspect that is very important for education. For example, and they're all important. For example, many of the competencies people need to be employable, such as analytical ability, communication skills, and the aptitude to work as part of a group, also help to make them active citizens in democratic societies, and they're fundamental for personal development. So we're not talking about separate purposes, but they are all interlinked. A few definitions also. I'm checking something before. Oh, they're further. Sorry about that. So first, we're going to look at the Charter, the Education for Democratic Citizenship and Human Rights Education Charter of the Council of Europe also sets very clear framework of how we see this purpose of education. And it talks about the right values and the principles that are at the foundation of such an education. It also says that such an education should have a certain pedagogy, should be learner-centered, should look at the whole person, should look at the whole life of the person, so longitudinal, lifelong learning, and also language competency is central if we want people to communicate and to work together towards better society. So mutual respect and trust can be there, and also in education, trust between teachers and learners. Decision-making processes need to be shared, and participation in school life need to be as important for all. Now, here are a few definitions terms that I will be using. So competency is the ability to mobilize and deploy relevant values, attitudes, skills, knowledge, and understanding in order to respond in a given situation to the demand and challenges and opportunities. So we're here also very close to the definition I think we have in Entrecomp. A descriptor is a statement that describes an observable behavior. And a learning outcome is what a learner is expected to do, know, and understand. So sometimes descriptor and learning outcome is a subtle difference, but it's important to see that the descriptor really talks about something that is observable and accessible because observable. So there is an idea here of objective because observable, but of course I wouldn't go too far in that direction. Everything stays extremely subjective when you're talking about competencies for democratic culture, because it involves so many different areas that interconnect that I think we need to keep the subjectivity in mind. The competences are also time dependent. It's not because you have them at a time T1 that you're going to have them in a time T2. They are context dependent. I can be willing to show competence with this person, but with another person I'm going to react differently. And they're situation dependent. I can be very at ease in one place and be able to show competence, and not so at ease and with uncertainty, for example, in another situation, and I won't show such good competence. So it's important to see also that this reference framework talks about what it is, and it also talks about what it is not. It's very essential to see this tool as an empowerment tool. An empowerment tool for the young learner, for the older learner, and for the educator. So it should never be used to harm anyone, even and especially when being used for assessment. It should also always be inclusive of everyone. The assessment should include a recognition of all degrees of competency, because it is not a linear acquisition. So you don't develop first one competency, then you move on to the next. We're talking about something that is much more intertwined. So you develop competencies in parallel and in connectedness. And sometimes it would look more like the spiral here, where because you're developing your competencies, then suddenly you discover a new area of development, and this new area can bring you to other areas, etc. So no linear progression, but ever-increasing competence in intercultural dialogue and democratic process is what is expected. The clustering of competencies will be very important for educators. You're never going to be able to focus on one competence, and what you actually want to do is develop learners' capacity to react to real-life situations. So the clustering allows for this. For example, if you take post-conflict reconciliation, if you want to develop that in your learners, then they will need flexibility, adaptability. So on the attitude side, they will also need openness to other points of view. They will need critical thinking. On the knowledge side, they will also need to have the communication skills on the skills side. So it's always a cluster that actually brings the model into the real life situation. So now let's go into how to do it. If you look at the democratic citizenship and the entrepreneurial frameworks, I took an example here, and the example is about communication. Okay, so both these models are similar across, have many cross sections. The main enrichment comes from engaging with the ideals of society, I think, that the RFCDC can bring in combination with EntreComp. For example, these ideals or these values of fairness, access, equity are often not so present in the underpinnings of the discourse and ideas on entrepreneurship. For example, what are CEOs of tomorrow supposed to have in terms of these values and ideas? The term, if you look at this example I have here, I hope it's big enough for you to see on both levels. So the one on top is EntreComp, and the one on the bottom comes from the RFCDC. You will see that one is much more on the I can deploy these capacities, and then you see that the RFCDC is looking at the relation with the other and with a heavy accent on the intercultural communication. So the other as the other can be different. And so you have the development of competencies to kind of communicate across all sorts of borders. We're not talking about countries or nationalities here. We're really talking about all sorts of communication borders. So it's the same issue. There's a little bit of a different focus, but are they complementary is a question that I would ask you, and I see in the poll that a lot of you are already combining, so this would be an interesting question, I think. For example, it's often all in the subtleties. So you see here, don't look at me with that tone of voice. I could be saying the exact same thing to you in different ways, and they would mean different things. So as you saw in the RSCDC, there is this aspect of reading body language, paralingual language such as tone, for example, on top of the capacity to communicate, persuade that Entrecomp and focuses more on. So you, the skills of listening and observing are seen as very important in terms of democratic skills because it is often in these more subtle aspects of our communication that democratic processes break down. So they're very important to focus on. The areas of use of the RSCDC, and I think of both models, is curriculum development. Ellen gave you the example of Ukraine. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. Pedagogy, assessment, whole school approach, teacher education, and of course, policy making in all the above areas. The reason I have here pedagogy and assessment in bold is that I will only be talking about those two in this presentation. General recommendations from the EU, different bodies of the EU, are fairly the same. We see that the teacher of the 21st century is asked to move from a more teaching focus to a more learning focus. And so you have the different aspects of both on each side of your slide here, and from teacher at the center, students at the center, from the lecturer to the facilitator of learning, frontal, active pedagogies, competitive, cooperative. So these are, be it the OECD, the EU, the Council of Europe, these are recommendations that have been coming to us now for many years. What I like to do, and this is something I propose to people, to the teachers, the expert teachers who were working on this curriculum development with us in April in Ukraine, and I suggested that they start off before a teacher should really feel comfortable to use these. And so there are a few things that should be done before, and also knowing where you're at, which is a lot easier if you want to know where you're going, to know where you're coming from, so that they have a better picture of what's up, what's in front of you and what's coming. So here, if you look at the level of decision making, where are decisions made, and from teaching to learning focus, so referring to the slide I just showed you. In certain countries, the decision making is more centralized. In other systems, education systems, it's more decentralized. The most decentralization is when it's the school that decides its own curriculum, for example, and in some other situations or systems, it's the state that develops a curriculum for everyone. So centralized, decentralized, and if you look at the teaching toward and learning, so traditional to a more holistic approach, then you will see that the knowledge-based curriculum or competence, knowledge-based is more on the traditional and centralized. And if you're going to a competence-based approach, you will be more on the other spectrum. Now, if you're knowledge-based, you're often teaching about democracy. If you're competence-based, you're learning through democracy, which means that you're actually developing learners' capacity to participate in decisions and do all these things that were in the star that I showed you before. So participation, inclusion, human rights, etc. So you're going through. And then the way you're going to adapt pedagogy or an assessment depends on where you're at here, because that means what are the directions that you have to develop in order to get to where you want to be. Of course, these competencies concern all subjects, be it subject-specific, cross, or trans-curricular. Now, these are questions that I think that you could ask, any teacher could ask him or herself to know also what needs to be done in order to shift to a competence-based pedagogy. So, for example, to what extent do you say your teaching contributes towards learners becoming active citizens, respecting human rights? How often do your students have the opportunity to express their own ideas, listen to different views, discuss the difference in class? How often do you actually talk about human rights, justice, equality? How is your current practice facilitating the development of learners' emotional intelligence? We were talking about the personal development aspect of the purpose of education. So this is very important in the personal development part. And how are you providing time for learners to work with each other, fostering both individual understanding and social processes? And how often are you including practical activities, experiential learning, and do you effectively bring learners' previous experience into your teaching? So these are questions that you can use to assess your current practice, which can inform where you want to go. Here's an example of a pedagogy that develops in parallel so many things that I think is interesting. Maybe some of you are using cooperative learning. If you don't know about cooperative learning, there's a lot of resources that can be found for free out there on the internet. Cooperative learning is our principles and structures of pedagogy that allows for four main principles to be there, which is equal access and engagement of learners, learners working simultaneously and in parallel, so not listening to a teacher, but everyone involved in a task, being interdependent. Different groups have different work to do, and the work cannot be done if all the work of the whole of the groups are not put together. And individual responsibility. It's not because I'm in a group that I can not do the work, because everyone has a different role in the group. And so when you look at these principles, you see that they're developing a lot of what we are looking for in entrepreneurial skills and in citizenship skills. Here you have the Kagan, Johnson & Johnson, which are good resources if you're interested in cooperative learning. And No One Left to Hate is a very good book about how it can reduce violence in schools. So by engaging in these processes, for example, you're working on openness to others' beliefs and thoughts, responsibility for your own actions, being autonomous in your learning, having more empathy, flexibility, cooperation skills. So all these things are very important for entrepreneurial and for democratic citizenship. So we see how this type of pedagogy can be so rich. Assessment. I'm not going to go deep into assessment because assessment is very complex, and if we wanted to talk about that, we would need a session only on that, I think. And probably a lot of you have different experiences, but these are democratic assessments, or an assessment that is democratic. Okay, we'll have, of course, any assessment system has reliability and validity and practicality, but respectfulness, equity, and transparency should be there if the assessment is going to be democratic. For these, you remember we said no harm done, so I'm not going to start evaluating learners' values. That would be totally unacceptable. And so we need to look at ways of assessment that engage the learner in own assessment, in peer work. So only formative assessment can really work here. Doing portfolios, allowing for subjectivity, self-assessment is very important. Now, using descriptors as checklists and watching a student and saying, yeah, okay, he has this and he's doing that, is really not something we're looking for. I'm going to finish with showing you another tool, which is called Cards for Democracy, and it's a set of 60 cards. It has very simple language. Now, the content is the same practically as the RFCDC in terms of the descriptors, but the language has been extremely simplified. And it's a card game, so you can do many activities and games. It's fast. I used it in many occasions, and teachers catch on with it very easily, and young people and children do. And I'm saying children, and that's very important because you have to have tools in which the children themselves actually understand what are the observable behaviors you're talking about. So if we're sticking to the language that is used in the reference models, younger children are going to have a difficulty doing that. And I've seen teachers have a difficulty understanding the descriptors too. So these cards kind of translate the same ideas in a much more simple way. And the goal of the 60 cards is to play games, to co-construct a more just and happy society, and to reflect on your own intention and nurture a disposition to examine and improve transversal attitude, skills, and knowledge towards a democratic culture. Now, these cards are available for free. You see examples here. I reformulate people's ideas, opinions, and views to verify my understanding, which is, of course, obviously very important for entrepreneurial and for democratic processes to happen in communication. And so here, these cards are available for free. We just put them on Creative Commons, and you can get them on our website, downloadable very easily, and we hope that you will use them in order to develop. And we are planning to do other editions. We already have one for teachers, so all the cards start with democratic teachers, do this, and it's very pedagogy oriented. We're planning on doing one for school heads, which will be more education leadership oriented. And then probably the next after that will be very young kids, like we're talking 8-year-olds, okay? So all this is extremely important, and why? These approaches show that it all starts with me. That's a very important realization. There are structural issues in our societies. There's structural violence. There's structural racism, structural discrimination. But we all have our individual responsibility. Here I'm showing a right-wing group of young people, right-wing, far right-wing, but I could also have shown you one of the boats coming in from the Mediterranean, or children separated from their families, which I'm not going to talk about because I already feel my throat twisting as I say it. But these issues are really important, and education and educators really need to start playing their role here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Pascale. That was a very interesting presentation, really illustrating where I think the potential is to take citizenship education, but also to recognize the entrepreneurial development that can come through the practical activities that you highlighted there. And I would also advocate the cards for democracy. I've used them in a workshop that I participated in with Pascale in Ukraine, and yeah, they're really good. Highly recommended. Download. I think we're gonna save questions for the end, and we're gonna move straight now to Irene, who was talking really about the Nemesis project, the Horizon 2020 project. So I'd say thank you, Pascale, but we're going to come back to you at the end, if that's all right. Okay. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
a lot.
We've got a couple of questions come in, so we will, and of course we will be sharing presentations. Thank you, Irene. Lovely to see you there. We would like to now move to both the discussion of the how to combine these competencies, and also then to share the vision of the Nemesis project, as the slide there, empowering the change makers of tomorrow. So very, very linked to what Pascale has been talking about, and in bringing in both these competence areas as well. So we'd like to share with you information about the Nemesis project, and we are very grateful to have Irene here to talk about that. So welcome, Irene, and thank you for being with us. I give the Ethernet, the internet, the World Wide Web of this particular webinar to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. And also thank you very much for inviting us to talk about Nemesis in this webinar. Just a short introduction about myself. So my name is Irene Kalemaki, and I'm working for Stimuli, one of the partners of the Nemesis project. Stimuli is located in Thessaloniki in Greece, and we are mainly doing research on social innovation and social entrepreneurship. My background is in social sciences, and the last 7 years I'm working on EU projects on social innovation. Okay. Now I will try to provide you with some background information about our project. So Nemesis is an EU project funded by Horizon 2020 program. The project started on October 2017 and will finish by January 2021. So we are still in our first year, and the work I'm going to present you today is still in progress. However, I will try to give you with the first flavor of what we are doing and what is our philosophy and our approach towards education. Also, let me mention that Nemesis as a project consists of 14 partners from 7 different European countries. Specifically, we represent organizations with expertise in the education and the social innovation sector. We also have in the consortium social innovation practitioners and also schools and organizations representing school heads and national authorities. Okay, and what we do in very few words is that we co-design an educational model with and for schools of primary and secondary education that aims at empowering students to become the future social innovators and the change makers of Europe. How we do this? We bring together different stakeholders such as teachers, parents, students, social innovation practitioners, who collaborate both inside and outside the classroom towards a common goal, which is actually to co-design social innovation projects that offer solutions to local challenges. And in this way, we aim at improving both teaching and learning on social innovation and also contribute to the development of more responsible, active and creative citizens. So in this respect, our motto, which also reflects our vision about Nemesis, is that by bringing together education and social innovation, we aim to empower students to become the change makers of tomorrow. This vision was actually generated as a response to the emerging needs for educating and motivating the young people to cope both with the challenges and the opportunities that will form our societies. Because we are actually living in a very rapidly changing world and complexity prevails and societal challenges are becoming so pressing and require for innovative but also responsible solutions. So in this respect, we question ourselves how education could enable young people to actively contribute to a better society. And with Nemesis, we try to provide an answer on this question by considering the key role that education and social innovation could play. Particularly, we consider that social innovation education can be a vehicle for the empowerment of young people to drive positive social change by sociopolitically activating and enabling them to put their knowledge and their skills, of course, into practice in order to solve the critical problems that our societies are facing in a responsible and sustainable manner. And however, one may ask why education and social innovation can be a tool for achieving this goal. So I will try to explain why by starting firstly with what is social innovation. And this is important because although both as a term and as a practice, social innovation has gained a lot of momentum the last decade. However, it still creates confusion. And this happens, of course, because social innovation takes various forms. It can be a product, a process, a business model, and so on. And also because it can happen in all sectors of society, in the non-profit sector, the business sector, the public sector, and so on. When talking about social innovation in single words, we refer to the process of finding novel solutions to solve social problems, no matter from what sectors these solutions may come. However, in this process, what is the most important thing that should be stressed is that social innovation leads to new and improved relations and collaborations. This means that social innovation has a strong potential to empower people, to transform mindsets and build capacities. And this is actually what makes social innovation interesting and also relevant to education. Because we actually see that both education and social innovation have a common mission, which is to empower people to become active participants in the transformation of their societies. Yes, so in Nemesis, we don't see social innovation just as a problem-solving process, but we focus a lot on this empowering and transformative power of social innovation. So in this context, we are developing the Nemesis model, which aims at introducing social innovation education at schools. As I said from the beginning, the work I'm presenting today is still in progress, and it will evolve in the next 2.5 years in order to provide us with a concrete framework for implementing Nemesis and social innovation education. So what we have done so far is the development of a working definition on social innovation education and the competencies related to it. And according to our understanding, as you can see in the slide, we define social innovation education as a collaborative and collective learning process for the empowerment and socio-political activation of students to drive social change no matter their professional pathways. Based on this definition, that was a result of the literature review and the interviews we had with teachers and social innovators, we tried to conceptualize what competencies could be cultivated through social innovation education. However, given that social innovators can come from various sectors, it was very, very challenging to define a specific set of competencies that can be directly associated with them. So in this line of reasoning and having in our minds the transformative and empowering aspects of social innovation, we decided that the Nemesis model should not only focus on competencies that are related to innovation and entrepreneurship, but also to pay attention to both individual and collective competencies that can empower people to take action and achieve collective outcomes. So with this rocket, we try to visualize the competencies related to social innovation by presenting them under three categories: competencies which are important for identifying opportunities for social and collective value creation, competencies which are essential for developing collaborations and building meaningful relationships, and competencies which are key for taking action both individually and collectively. And finally, I would like to mention that with this work, we don't aim at providing a fixed answer on social innovation education, but rather we encourage diverse opinions and approaches, and of course flexibility in interpreting these concepts according to the different contexts. So if someone see our work Nemesis, may identify many links and connections with other competence frameworks. And actually, this is what we tried to do, to combine entrepreneurial learning with citizenship and democratic education. Particularly when we were developing the Nemesis competencies, we were inspired by various competence frameworks such as ENDRECOMP and the Framework for Democratic Competencies developed by the Council of Europe. One comment regarding ENDRECOMP, although we find the competencies defined by it as very relevant also for social innovators, we felt that due to the differences that exist between traditional entrepreneurs and social innovators, and I refer to differences in mindsets and overall culture, we felt that we had to search for additional inspiration in other competence frameworks, paying, let's say, more attention to collective outcomes and values. And this inspiration came by the Council of Europe framework, mainly because of the great emphasis it puts on the values for framing the knowledge, the skills and attitudes. Actually, as this framework states, without these values that underpin these competencies, they wouldn't be democratic competencies, but more general competencies. So in Nemesis, we believe that the same principle applies in social innovation learning, and social innovation competencies need to be integrated with values, because values are actually those shaping the beliefs, mindsets of social innovators that affect their choices and generally their approach to the world. So this was our main concept when defining competencies. And now, given that I'm running out of time, I'd like to present in more detail the Nemesis model in a more practical way, actually. Okay. So here you can see the three key elements of Nemesis. Co-creation labs, a community of social innovation practitioners, and an online learning platform. These three things, these three elements are what we are developing right now and what we are going to test in the next month. Starting with co-creation labs, this is the most important thing, the starting point actually where the overall Nemesis model is activated. Particularly schools interested in introducing Nemesis are invited to establish a co-creation lab at their schools as an open innovation and learning environment where different stakeholders such as teachers, students, parents, social innovators and other members of the local community will come together and collaborate towards a common goal, which is to co-create social innovation projects by combining different learning practices as shown in the slide. Then the second important element is the creation of an online community of social innovators. And that's because in Nemesis we give a great emphasis on linking theory to practice and providing inspiration and practical experiences to students in order to enable them to become agents of change. Therefore, we are developing a pool of social innovators that will collaborate with students in the framework of the co-creation labs. And finally, the third important element of Nemesis is the creation of an online learning platform that will provide access to the community of social innovators and also to relevant learning resources, practical guides, and material that will enable other interested schools to experiment with the Nemesis model. This platform will be available and open for all in the coming months, so interested schools will be able to register there and take part in the project. And finally, in more practical words, what happens in a co-creation lab? The main objective is to engage students with other stakeholders to collaborate and co-create social innovation projects. A social innovation project could be, for instance, an iconic social enterprise, a community awareness campaign, or even a school initiative that offers a solution to a local problem, sustainability problem. For the design and implementation of these projects, students should participate in co-creation activities and actually undergo 5 stages as presented in this figure. The first stage aims at introducing students to social innovation and get inspired. The second stage aims at enabling students to select the topics of their projects by focusing on local challenges. The third stage enables students to investigate in depth their topics by participating, let's say, in the service learning experiences that contribute to the development of a stronger sense of empathy towards the people involved in this problem. Then the fourth stage aims at idea generation. It fosters creative and responsible thinking and promotes collaborations. And finally, we have the fifth stage, which is about the transfer of ideas to practice with the help of the members of the social innovators, who will act as mentors for students participating in the co-creation labs. Through the co-creation lab stages, we see that various learning opportunities are generated, as shown in this slide. Students develop a better understanding on social innovation. They are motivated to engage in social change activities. They learn how to collaborate efficiently in order to reach a common goal. They share responsibility and make decisions on a democratic manner, respecting different views. They learn how to conduct research and analyze the root causes of a problem. And generally, they develop competencies related to social innovation through the whole process of designing and implementing a social innovation project. So, for schools attending the webinar today, if you find it interesting, there is an opportunity to participate in Nemesis and help us refine the model. There are actually two pilot periods. The first one starts this September and will be implemented with 8 schools already participating in our consortium. But the second pilot period, starting on September 2019, is open to any interested school around Europe. So if you find it interesting, you can contact us and we can provide you with more details. You can contact us either through our website or our social media accounts presented in this slide. That's all from my side. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Irene. That's really great. Now, I think we have a number of questions coming in for both of you. But perhaps I just want to follow up just by saying thank you so much. That was a very, very interesting webinar. And I think a great example of how people are looking at social innovation and how people are really trying to sort of get to grips with this, which there isn't much research about in terms of education sometimes. And it's such an important tool and methodology that we should be introducing, because I think, you know, so often you hear that young people want to make an impact in their community, and to really look at a high quality social innovation methodology, process, action-oriented approach will be very valuable. And so I'm very interested to follow what you're doing, and also very thankful to have heard the introduction that you've given us today. So very appreciative. Thank you very much. Now, we've had a few questions coming through, a couple, of course, saying, how do I get involved in Nemesis? Well, you've heard from Irene that the second large-scale pilot period is actually open to any interested school. So get in touch with them, register on Facebook, on Twitter, on the project website that you can see there, and you can actually get involved. One question coming in, perhaps I can ask both Pascale and Irene to open up your cameras so that you're on screen so people can see you, if that would be okay. A question coming in from Monia Mahmoudi. Could a school from Tunisia participate? So perhaps we can make this wider. Is it, can schools from outside the EU member states participate in this project, in the second large-scale pilot? Would that be possible, Irene?
Yes, actually, we're very happy. Yes, of course.
Great, that's fantastic. I think there'll be a number of schools interested to look at this. I'd comment again on the work happening in the Ukraine as well. There was so much interest in the sort of this education for democratic culture, education for social change, and education for social innovation links in very closely to that. Okay, so I'd like to go to a few broader questions. Perhaps Pascale, we had a few specific questions, and as I said, a lot of interest in the cards for democracy. Are they translated at all? Is that available on your website?
Very good question. I should have talked about that. Yeah, we have, so LearnToChange is also a community of educators. So we have an online platform with 2,000 educators working together in there. And so we started contacting a few of our members to do translations. We have already a Greek translation that is done, but it's being looked at by a team to make sure it's quality checked. We have a team working on the French version and a team working on Ukrainian version. Soon we're going to gather a team for an Italian version, but we hope to be covering most of the European languages very soon. And as the versions come in, they'll be put on our website, also available for free. Thank you for the...
Is it possible for teachers and educators participating in this webinar to join the LearnToChange community? And
absolutely.
Great. And perhaps to even volunteer themselves to translate.
We would love to have some more volunteers, because the more languages we have, the better the tool will be useful for many educators and learners.
And as I said,
to get involved, you also go through the website. The website, you don't need the link. It's very easy, learntochange.eu. Easy address, and then you have join. There's a blue button. You just click on it and you can follow. You can also just subscribe also to the blog.
Great.
And get the regular information.
So there's an invitation for getting sort of into a community which is very involved in education for democratic citizenship. Okay, second question coming in from for Pascale. Are there any examples of CDC linked to reflective teacher diaries? Is that something that there might be an example of implementation out there for those competencies for democratic culture or practice happening?
Yes. So there has been a train the trainer module using the RSCDC with about 40 academics and teachers from different countries of Europe, and they actually went to a training and then did some own work, developing a training unit adapted to their context in their countries. And I think this work involves designing pedagogical approaches. It also involves looking back at how you are faring with the framework itself and in your own practice. So I would consider that very close to action research, and so maybe more than a diary, but more process-oriented than just a diary, but it has been used. I prepared a link. Can I share it?
Yes, absolutely.
Should I be sharing it in the...
Share it in the chat box. There's also been a request to your blog, a link to your blog, and we've popped in a link to your website. But if you have a more specific link, that would be great. Brilliant. And then
so this link here is a Council of Europe link with 18 training units developed by teachers around Europe using the RSCDC to help other teachers learn about it and use it themselves.
Brilliant. Okay. So perhaps the last question I have for Pascale, and then we've got a couple for Irene. I work on on the research of values in the teaching process, and I would like to know more about value-based education, not only implicitly but explicitly realized and planned within curricula. Any sort of pointers, top tips, or places that you can direct colleagues to for value-based education, explicitly presented within a curriculum?
Okay, there are many ways to understand this question, so it's a bit complex. As you saw in the RFCDC butterfly, the values are there. They are explicit. There's 3 that are intercultural based, human rights based, and I think it's explicit enough. But in terms of explicitly putting values in a curriculum, I would also caution, because values is something that is very personal and cannot be put under too much control. And so values are foundational and infuse what is proposed, but also putting it in a curriculum could be an attempt to assess values, which we don't want either. So it depends how you understand the question, but I do think the RFCDC places values very clearly within the framework.
Okay. Okay, perhaps there's a question, the question that I have, you mentioned for Irene now, you mentioned that you're looking at sort of the collective competencies. I wondered if you'd like to explain a bit more about how you see that working in practice within the activities that you're promoting, the sort of the collective as well as then the individual, and perhaps how educators need to adapt practice to work with that more effectively, to really bring out the working collectively as an activity and as a competence as well.
Yeah, actually, the backbone of Nemesis is co-creation. Co-creation and collaborative learning. And this process is this process will contribute to collective competencies. So in practice, students, teachers, and other participants will be involved all the time in co-creation activities through which they will learn how to collaborate, to communicate, and build new relationships that may contribute through the whole process in the development of collective competencies.
Have you explored the assessment question in any way as yet, or is it something that you're going to be working?
Not
Okay.
yet. Not yet, because we are still at the very beginning.
I think our last webinar, I'm sure there are people within the webinar, within this webinar who were also present then, was actually around assessment and perhaps, you know, it's not an easy one. I think Pascale also alluded to assessment being something that you really need to consider in the context of what you're trying to develop and the learning setting that you're in. And the purpose, and she's highlighted this difficulty of assessing values as well, which is something that's going to come through the Nemesis project, I think. And I think that's something I imagine we want to address through the series of webinars that we look at, assessment again, because I think we can move forward from perhaps the last workshop seminar we did to something more developed. Okay, so the other question we had is a very sort of practical question. Irene, what languages is the platform available in? Because there's a lot of interest in using the platform. What languages will it be available in?
It will be available in English, or Greek, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Portuguese. I cannot hear you, Aline.
Sorry, I muted my microphone because I was getting a bit of feedback. Portuguese, French, Spanish, Greek, and English. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so there should be some, hopefully that will cover some of the languages that people are interested in. Of course, always mention the Google Chrome tool, which, you know, can offer auto translation. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. So please remember, if that's one of those, your language is not one of those languages, Google Chrome can be a useful tool to translate any website into the language that you need. Okay, those are anyone else got any questions for either Pascale or Irene? In the meantime, I'd like to open up a quick question just to see. So from this poll, from this webinar, the information, the examples, the inspiration, I think, that have been shared in this webinar, how do you think you might use it? We've still got quite a lot of people online. We'll be closing in just a few minutes now. But let's type just open question now. Let's get some ideas from people. How do you think you might use the information, the examples, the links shared in this webinar today? I think for myself, I've gained a lot of insight into the Nemesis project and what it's hoping to achieve. And I think also I'm very interested to explore the challenges of bringing values into education. I work with Entrecomp a lot, and we talk about the creation of value, which Irene has highlighted. They're looking through the Nemesis project to create social value. But when we talk about personal values, then that's something very, very, very personal to yourself. And how do we best bring that into education? How do we best allow people to explore their own values in a safe environment, in a non-judgmental environment? So I think this is something that it really brought some curiosity out from my side. So, okay, some answers coming in. Assessing my teaching practices first, working on curriculum for the new Ukrainian school, definitely. Obviously, that's where Pascale and I first met, is supporting the teacher experts in their work to develop the curriculum for new Ukrainian school. Participate in a pilot project. Oh, yes. I think Nemesis is looking for participants, and LearnToChange is looking for participants in their community as well, and to download those cards for democracy and translate them. They're looking for volunteers. Get inspired for future projects. I am certainly inspired. And talk to colleagues, certainly. There's interesting way. I have got some standard forms of value by recognized psychologists proved to be successful in different cultures. So the Council of Europe framework will be another to add into her research. Excellent, or his research possibly. Great, thank you. Okay, some interesting answers coming through here, and of course you should be able to see these. Okay, now what I'd like to ask now, first of all, I'd like to say just a big thank you to Pascale, to Irene for sharing your expertise, your knowledge. I think we've had our highest number of participants in this webinar that we've ever had for one of the entrepreneurial learning webinars. So thank you very much. It's obviously piqued people's interest, and that people are curious about these topics and want to explore them. So I think for us it's an opportunity to say thank you, to go away, to reflect on what you've said, and then perhaps to come back together after the summer to explore some of these topics in more detail, perhaps. So thank you very much. The recording and presentations will be shared online. There is a feedback survey link there, and of course please stay updated, sign up for more webinars. The next webinar will be same time, same place, on the 20th of September, but I'd like to open a poll just because we'd like to ask you, what, perhaps inspired by this webinar, perhaps inspired by the last one on assessment or the previous ones on Entrecomp, what topics would be useful to you to address in future webinars? And we have an additional question from Maria Saugiadaki in Greece. I know that she's from Greece because she's one of the case studies in the Entrecomp Into Action user guide. She gave us a great case study on the Entrecomp giant that she designed. Can we discuss with both presenters in the collaborative space? Certainly you can leave questions for them, but also I'm sure that they will respond to direct emails as well, and they've shared their contact details through the presentation. But certainly if you've got questions, please forward them through the collaborative space, and we can then connect you with Irene and Pascale. Okay, great. So I got some good ideas. Teachers' team building techniques, STEM careers, gender equality. I think DigComp and other competences links. Yes. I think gender equality is also something that we can explore in terms of building these entrepreneurial skills and really embedding how do we represent a more equal view of society within our work. How to implement democratic values in a heavily centralized school system. These are Entrecomp for adults. Yeah, great. Multicultural education. Okay, there's some broad topics here, so I will share this with the School Education Gateway team, and we'll have a bit of a discussion about what we can go forward with. But the next webinar will be 20th of September at 12:30 Central European Time, and of course it will be recorded. And if you want to sign up so we'll end that poll. If you want to sign up to the future webinars, please click on the SurveyMonkey link and you'll go straight through, and then we'll make sure you know what's happening and when. But on behalf of myself, the School Education Gateway team, the Commission and European SchoolNet, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you on the 20th of September. Thanks again to Irene and Pascale. Have a great summer, people.
Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you.